Hello friends, my name is Jitendra Bhapna. I am Senior MuleSoft Architect. In this video, we are going to see what is MuleSoft Dedicated Load Balancer, what are the features of MuleSoft Dedicated Load Balancer, how you can set up the mapping rule, and how you can set up the Dedicated Load Balancer. So in my last video, I have already shown you like how to set up the VPC, what is the architecture of the VPC, and why we require the dedicated load balancer. I will just summarize what we have done in the last video. So basically what happens, so when you deploy the application on port 8081 and 8082, okay, which will be available on the shared load balancer, but when you deploy your application on 8091 and 8092, the application will be available within the VPC, so you cannot access that application using the shared load balancer. So you require the dedicated load balancer to access that particular application. And apart from that, like once you deploy the application to the CloudHub, it give one internal DNS record which is mule walker, internal mule walker, and then that is the app name .cloudhub.io basically. Okay, and once you create a dedicated load balancer, it also give one DNS record which is lbname.lb.anypointdns.net. We will going to see that in the MuleSoft dedicated load balancer. Okay, so just this is the summarize. So why we want, why we want a dedicated load balancer. Now let's understand what is dedicated load balancer. So basically a dedicated load balancer is the optional component in Anypoint platform which allow to route external HTTP or HTTPS traffic to the multiple application deployed to the cloud hub within the VPC. So basically what happens, you can deploy a multiple application in the cloud hub within the VPC on port 8091 or on port 8092, right? If you want to access that particular application using a single domain like apiexample.com, right? So you can make use of dedicated load balancer, and dedicated load balancer is the one option that you can access your application within the VPC. Okay, apart from that, each dedicated load balancer has a DNS record, that is LB name. So that is the load balancer name .lb.anypointdns.net that resolve to the two public IP addresses of the two instances. So basically when we create a dedicated load balancer, it's recommended to select the two workers. So it means it will give a two public IP address. So basically this particular DNS will resolve to two public IP address. So if you see this particular public like DNS is not user friendly, so what generally we do, so like we create some custom DNS which is like api.example.com, like anything. So then we create, we have a custom DNS like api.example.com. Then we do the DNS entry, like we map the api.example.com with this particular DNS record with particular this CNAME, or either we can map with this particular two IP addresses, the public IP addresses which generated during the creation of the dedicated load balancer. Okay, so what is difference between a shared load balancer and a dedicated load balancer? So shared load balancer is by default available in all your MuleSoft or your CloudHub environment. Okay, a shared load balancer provide basic functionality like TCP load balancing. Shared load balancer doesn't support a custom or doesn't allow you to configure a custom SSL certificate and the proxy rules. Shared load balancer have a lower rate limit and it is different for each region. So basically when you deploy the application on the worker in different region, each of the application expose one shared load balancer, and each shared load balancer will have a different rate limit. So generally, like there is a lower rate limit on the shared load balancer to maintain the stability of the application. So basically when your application deploy to CloudHub which exceed the rate limit, right, in that case that particular application will return 503 service unavailable. So how you can avoid that particular rate limit issue? So in that case you can use the dedicated load balancer. Dedicated load balancer is the one way where you can avoid this lower rate limit issue. Apart from that, you can deploy all your application, or you can host all your application within a single domain. So generally when you deploy the shared load application on the shared load balancer, right, so in that case what happen, you have a different DNS for each and every application. So to avoid that, you can make use of dedicated load balancer. So apart from that, dedicated load balancer support the custom certificates. You can set up the mapping rules. It also support the two-way authentication. I will show you how you can configure that. Apart from that, it handle load balancing among the different CloudHub worker that run your application. So this is the architecture of the dedicated load balancer. So generally, I have already shown in my last video how you can create the Anypoint VPC. So generally, I've created Anypoint VPC with a CIDR mask of 10.0.1.0/24. So you have deployed app1, app2, and app n within your CloudHub or within the VPC on port 8091 and port 8092, depending on that, like either you want your application run on HTTP port, so you deploy on 8091. When you want to run the application on port like HTTPS, so you deploy on 8092. So I have deployed the application within the VPC. Now I have created dedicated load balancer within the same VPC, and when I create a dedicated load balancer, it give like I've selected two workers, so it will basically give the two public IP address. This is just a demo IP address, it will give any two public IP address, and it will also create one that DNS record. So that is the LB name, whatever dedicated load balancer name you give, like for example test DLB. So test DLB dot LB dot anypoint DNS dot net. So that is the DNS you get it when you create a dedicated load balancer. Generally what we do, we have to do the public DNS entry. So basically I want some custom URL. This particular LB name doesn't looks a good, like it's not user friendly. So either what I can do, I can create some api.example.com and I can map in the DNS registry with this IP address. So generally it recommended like you can map with IP addresses also, that two IP addresses given by dedicated load balancer, or you can use this apiexample.com and you can map this particular DNS record which has been created by a dedicated load balancer. Okay, so this is the architecture of dedicated load balancer. Now any consumer want to send a request to connect this particular application, so he will send a request on https://api.example.com/app name/whatever resource path it will give. The dedicated load balancer will apply the mapping rule and transfer the request to application one application, depending on what comes in the URLs. So yeah, and depending on the mapping rules set on the dedicated load balancer. So we will see in the example so how we can set up the dedicated load balancer mapping rule. Apart from that, like start setting up. So the first step to create a dedicated load balancer, you have to go to runtime manager. Under runtime manager you will see load balancer. You just so like you can create the load balancer basically. So for creating the load balancer, there must be at least one VPC exist in your business group or in your environment. So basically, so what you do, so then you can create a dedicated load balancer. Go to load balancer and just say create dedicated load balancer. Give the name of any name to dedicated load balancer. Then select the target VPC. So generally when you create the VPC, you need to like you can have a multiple VPC, and you need to make sure like generally what happens. So let's consider I am creating this dedicated load balancer for non-prod VPC. So generally for non-prod VPC we map the multiple environment like test and dev server. So like right, so there can be multiple environment map with the non-prod environment. So you make sure like you select the proper VPC target VPC here. So I will show you like so like now what will happen. So you have a one VPC and you have mapped the test and dev environment. So you can have a multiple DNS also. I will show you how you can create the multiple DNS and all those things. So I will show that. So now you select the two workers. So I've selected two workers, so it will give two IP address, and like timeout, it's by default 300. There are something like inbound HTTP mode, it off, on, and redirect. Off means like it will never allow the HTTP traffic from the towards the dedicated load balancer. If you do on, it will allow HTTP and HTTPS both. In case of redirect, so basically in case of redirect, what happens? So you are getting the traffic on HTTPS and you are transferring your traffic again to the HTTPS to the application deployed on the CloudHub. In that case, we select the direct. There are various options. Disable static IP. So basically disable static IP is specified to use the dynamic IP which do not persist when the dedicated load balancer restart. Keep URL encoding specified DLB passes only the +20 and the +23 character as is. So basically support TLS. So you need to support the TLS 1.0 between client and DLB, and like upstream TLS 1.2. So you like it should it should support TLS 1.2, or it should enforce the TLS 1.2 between dedicated load balancer and upstream CloudHub worker basically. So these are the things. So these are optional. So you want to select or not. So generally for inbound HTTP mode, like if you are using the SSL offloading, so come your request coming on HTTPS and you have to transfer the traffic on HTTP to the CloudHub application, then you can use the off. If your request coming on HTTPS and you want to transfer the traffic on the HTTPS to the CloudHub application, you can see use the redirect. So there are various options available. Then apart from that, like you need to set up the whitelist CIDR by default 0.0/0. So it will allow traffic from all the IP addresses. So basically, if some consumer try to send the request on dedicated load balancer, it will allow all the traffic. So but if you can restrict some IP's address, you can restrict some CIDR mask. You can say like I want traffic from like 10.0.2.0/24, right? So whenever traffic come from that particular IP range, so it will allow. Otherwise, it will drop other traffic. Okay. Then you can click on this particular like add certificate to add the certificates. Once you click on add certificates, so what you can do, once you click on this particular add certificates, so you need to provide a public key and the private key basically. So private key must be consist of root certificate and the intermediate certificate, chain of certificate, whereas a public key it's a public key of your SSL certificate. If you want to enable two-way handshake authentication, you can also specify the client certificates here. Then URL mapping rules, it's very important. So let's consider, so when I getting the request on dedicated load balancer, how dedicated load balancer will come to know where I have to transfer the request, to which application I have to transfer the request, then URL mapping rules come to the picture. So I will show you. So let's consider, I have some mapping rules. I've set up this particular mapping rule. Input path is slash, whenever you write anything into curly bracket, that is the variable, and my target app is app, then output part is slash, then protocol is HTTP. So basically I'm getting the request on HTTPS, I'm transferring on HTTP, so I specify the protocol here. Same thing like so basically my application name can be in this particular format also, right? So I've set up some rule, slash app curly bracket apps, that is my input path. Org, so it's some static value, so hyphen app, like there's like curly bracket subdomain is nothing, it's something, it's a reserved keyword, and like the protocol is HTTP. Let me explain on my notepad. So the first rule will be like that. So I'm getting the request on HTTP api.example.com, okay, slash, and my app name. So basically I'm saying some, I can say digital app, and I can say v1.0 slash invoices. Okay, so this is the request coming on my dedicated load balancer. The application deployed on my server or on my cloud, its name is digital app. Okay, so in that case I already shown, like each cloud hub application has some internal internal DNS record, right? So I will show you internal DNS record basically, so mule worker internal. So let me go to my notepad. So in that case, what will happen? So my rule, so what does my first rule says? Slash app, this app, slash app. So it's a first variable. So what is my app? It's digital app. So that become my app equal to digital app. In that case, what is my target app? It's a curly bracket app only. So in that case, what will happen? So I'm getting this particular request on HTTPS. So it will become HTTP, then mule worker internal, then it will become digital app. Let my application deployed in US East 1 E1 dot cloudhub.io slash v1.0 slash invoices. Okay, so that is how it will transfer the request to the application deployed to the cloud hub. Let's consider second scenario. I will show you. So I will show you that how this particular mapping rule works. So let me go to some of the representation. So here, like I get the request on https.apiexample.com/order API slash v1.0/orders. That is the first request. My mapping rule say input path slash curly bracket app, target app, it must be some app, curly bracket app. So that is whatever written in the variable, that is curly bracket, that is the variable. Then output path is slash, protocol is HTTP. In that case, what will happen? So I got the request on HTTPS. Now it will transport request on HTTP mule hyphen worker hyphen internal hyphen that target app, that is the curly bracket app. So what is app? That is the order API here. So it will become order API dot us east1 dot cloudhub.io slash the remaining URL v1.0. So I have the API deployed with name order API in on the CloudHub. Same thing, like I got the request https API example.com product API v1.0 slash products. So again it will apply the same rule. So http mule worker internal product API dot us east1 v1.0 slash product, it will transfer the request to the product API. That is how. And I will go to some complex mapping rule. So let's consider I have a VPC. Okay. In that VPC, I have two environment dev. I map two environment dev and test. So I have created DLB for that particular VPC. So that DLB is mapped to that VPC, which having two environment dev and test. Now what I have done, so I have created one dedicated load balancer. It gives the two IP address. Now what I have done, I have created two DNS. One is dev.api.example.com for dev environment, test.api.example.com. So you can map multiple DNS with the same dedicated load balancer. And so what I have done, instead of that, so I will go to that particular URL. Okay, so basically either these two IP addresses, or I can say, you know, so I am mapped with, the same, I can say LB name, so I can say test DLB, or I can say some org or non-prod DLB, and the same I am mapped with this particular test DNS also. Okay, so now what will happen, like how dedicated load balancer will decide the request is coming, it's has to route to dev environment or it's route to the test environment, right? So because we have a, like for seeing the same seeing one dedicated load balancer, we have a two DNS, dev.example.com, test.example.com. So, okay, so we will fix that issue also. How we can do that? So let me go to dedicated load balancer. Let me present it. So what happened? I got the request on, like I've set up some rule, mapping rule. Same input path remains same. Target app. This time curly bracket app hyphen subdomain. Subdomain, it's nothing. It's a like reserved keyword, and it will pick the that test. That is the subdomain in the URL, right? So the first thing in the URL, that is the subdomain. Let's consider I got the request on dev api.example.com slash API on the same dedicated load balancer, that is test DLB whatever. So it will apply the mapping rule. In that case, the first order API and the environment will become order API and the subdomain will become dev. So it will say order API dev. So it will become like this. Mule worker internal order API dev dot us east1.cloudhub.io v1.0. So it will identify order API dev application in the dev environment. See, here we are not saying, here just we are using this subdomain keyword and this particular DNS, to identify the correct environment. Same thing goes with the product. I got the dvapi.example.com slash product API v1.0 products. http hyphen mulewar hyphen internal product API dot hyphen dev dot us east1.cloudhub.io slash v1.0 slash product. So it will go to this particular product API. Now the request come on http test.api example.com slash order API v1.0 slash orders. Okay, in that case, what will happen? The app will become orders API and subdomain will become test now, So in this case, it again form that internal DNS record, mule worker internal order API, this time test.us is one. Now the application, the request is route to test. HTTPS test exam product API slash v10. Again, no, you can see the it applies the mapping rule, and you can see the request has been routed to the test product API. So we have a two environments. So like we have a single dedicated load balancer for dev and test, but using mapping rule, we are able to transfer the request to dev. Whenever requests come on the dev DNS, we transfer to dev using mapping rule. When requests come on a test DNS, we transfer to the test. Okay. I hope I have clear most of the concept related to dedicated load balancer. I hope you like the video. Thanks for watching.